stuff like that. And I know that you do, like I said, I love watching your videos of you breaking
Thank
down
you.
deal flow. Got a great YouTube channel that goes through that on a regular basis. But what if you think back when you first started doing your first couple of flips, what were probably the biggest lessons you learned right off the bat, Felipe?
Man, there are so many.
Yeah, I know.
You just don't know what you don't know until you get there, right? It's this day and age, everybody talks about technology and
Yeah.
there's a formula for this, algorithm for this, but there's no algorithm for experience, right? Once you get in there and you start doing it. So I do a great presentation that I title Five Biggest Deal Killers
Oh, this would be
that
awesome. Yeah.
are specifically for fix and flip. Because a lot of people, like you mentioned, they watch HGTV, they think it's easy. It's a very simple business, but just because it's simple, it doesn't mean it's easy. There's so many little things that you just don't know what you don't know. So, a couple things right off the bat is gonna be your deal source, right? We buy from motivated sellers, period. Motivated comes in many ways. It's not necessarily money or financial incentive. It's people going through transitions. It could be life transitions. It could be whatever you might name it, but there is a distress there somewhere in the situation or financial or whatever it is. So first thing is first, definitely buy from a motivated seller. That's going to be your biggest discount, your biggest opportunity to negotiate and buy where you need to buy. I always like to say, do you want to shop at Costco or do you want to shop where Costco shops? I don't know about you, but I want to shop where Costco shops. So
Amen to that, brother. Amen to
that's
that.
why we go direct to seller. So that's the first thing is really buying at a discount. There's so many margins that factor into a fix and flip that if you buying we do everything that we do is very short term, 6 to 12 months. We are in and out of the deal. So if I buy anything less than 78 cents on the dollar, and that is with me dialed in, knowing my margins, knowing my cost of capital, knowing my holding costs, performing on the time frame that we underwrite in, having the crew dialed in, professionals that go in there in and out. I might net 10 to 12% net after I pay all my investors, everything else. So if I buy anything more than 78 cents on the dollar, I'm already going to be in the negative.
Yeah.
Sometimes I see people buying at 83, 85 cents on the dollar, and they're going to be on the red at the end of the day, unless you're a hedge fund that you're buying, to sell later, counting appreciation and everything is speculating on your favor, then yeah, sure, that might make sense. But if you're doing short-term exposure in and out type of deals that we like to do, you got to have your margins dialed in, and that starts with the acquisition. You can't pay too much when you buy it. You can trust but verify the wholesaler that ARV might be less than you think, and that repairs might be more than you think, or it's being advertised, right? Right before we jumped and started the conversation, we talked about $5,000 rehab on a tear down, and that kind of brings me to it. Really know your numbers once you
Yeah.
get it into.
So true on that. So first one is obviously buy distressed. Second was know your numbers, right? Know your margins. And
Correct.
and then what
And
was it?
then and then I would say the most important piece of the fix and flip is going to be your ARV, right? Your after repair value. You really have to truly know what your ARV is. We started ARV and we dissect everything down. So not only do I look what I think the house is worth in today's market, but I look at the inventory level and I try to predict, hey, is this a hot market? How many months of active inventory is there in that pocket 0.5 mile radius of the subject property that can sustain that. If the inventory level is less than 6 months, less than 3 months, that's going to be a hot market in which we only use sold MLS data to come up with our ARV, Texas non-disclosure, like we talked about. But if I send an appraiser out there, that's what he can use. It's sold data, right? So that's what we look at, but then we look at the inventory and we try to stay competitive and kind of dictate, hey, is this going up? Is this going down? What's the trend? We always break everything down on price per square footage. We always start with ARV, price per square footage, and then everything else gets dissected from there. My profit, my offer, my repairs, everything starts with ARV. So I would say really dial in and know uh, different things in different market. And it's very important that sometimes you might comp out a property and on paper it looks great, but it's a different beast once you actually go walk it. And that is either you on your team or somebody that you trust. For example, we were about to purchase a property in Arlington. Beautiful property, everything checked out on paper. We were ready to do it. We went to do an inspection, and the neighbor owned a towing company and a trucking company. So the whole neighborhood was like an industrial.
Like a
No,
used car lot, you know, like
yeah,
places to.
there was no HOA, right? So I can't really regulate that. Or if I could, I just don't want to mess with it because it's going to be too much of a headache. So everything looked great on paper, but I knew when I was going to sell that property, even though it was going to be a beautiful property, the emotional uh, anchor of the buyer when they visit and see this whole thing that I can't control was going to be an attractive factor, right? So that's an example of something we passed on. Or we might look in the MLS, a property that might be 100 yards away, but it might be in a completely different neighborhood. So I got to know, compare apples to apples
Yeah.
or what my end product is going to be. So I'd say really dial in on the ARV. And there are things that whenever you fix and flip, you want to do cookie cutter deals, right? You don't want it's not going to be a property that you're going to live in it. Like I like land, I like acreage, and my what I desire might not necessarily be what I want to have that homogeneous cookie copy and paste subdivision 3-2 1,200 square foot in a subdivision. That's what the average home buyer is going to be. So I would say really dial in on that and know your after repair value. That's the most important factor. One other example before we move on the next one is the repair cost obviously is important. That's going to affect your margins. But if I'm off on my repair cost of, let's say, 10 to 20%, yeah, it's not ideal. I might be a few $1,000s less on my bottom line. But if I'm off 10 to 20% on an ARV, that's a big deal. I'm going to be on the red if it's going the other way around. So very, very important. I can't stress enough how knowing your ARV is.
Now, let me ask you a question about that because I totally 100% agree with you there.
Yeah.
What do you see with the market being like it is, where days on market are going from 30, 60 days to 90 to 120,
Yeah.
180 days? How are you kind of adjusting your ARV? Are you dropping it by 10%, to figure in this holding cost being a little bit longer for you, or
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a great question. So ARV, as I mentioned, is the most important factor, right?
Yeah.
So if I cannot predict an ARV, I will not get into a deal. The last prop we keep in mind, we buy 50 to 75 properties a year. The
Yeah.
last property I bought was December 17th, 2024.
Yeah.
2025, zero properties that I purchased for
Because the
this
market's all over
strategy.
crazy. Market's all over the place lately, hasn't it been?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I've seen stuff drop up to 10% uh, in the market, and if I can't predict what the ARV is going to be, I don't want to do that strategy.